Hello and welcome to Minerals, Rocks, and Fossil Talks. I'm your paleontology teacher, Jen, and it's Fossil Friday. We're going to talk about brachiopods. So brachiopods are interesting animals. They look a lot like clams and other bivalves, but they are actually more closely related to cuttlefish. Weird, right? 6 of the 8 families of brachiopods existed in the Ordovician period. So here's a few of the brachiopods you'll find in the Ordovician rocks. You'll find Platystrophia, which are these fun sort of uh, mountain, I don't know what you call these. They're sort of trapezoidal shaped. I find these a lot in limestones and mountains. Herbertella, which is a more roundish one, and Raffinisquina, or Raffinisquina. I'm not sure how to pronounce this one. These are also very common in Ordovician rocks, and um, they're kind of like half a quesadilla shaped. But exactly where did brachiopods come from? Well, one hypothesis, the brachiopod fold hypothesis, suggests that brachiopods evolved from an ancestor similar to Halkieria, which is a slug-like animal that had this sort of chain mail on its back and a shell on the front and rear ends. The hypothesis proposes that the first brachiopod converted its shells into a pair of folded valves, or paravalves, by folding the rear part of its body under its front. So you've got like your long, where's my camera here? Now, however, fossils from 2007 onwards have supported a new interpretation of the early Cambrian Tomotiids and a new hypothesis that brachiopods evolved from these animals. So they look more like this, closer to some of the worms that you find in the Cambrian rocks, and that there was no folding involved. So studies seem to suggest that Halkieria is more closely related to mollusks, while our tomotiids are more closely related to brachiopods. So Wolfangella here was what we were looking at. So these are our tomotiids over here, are much more closely related to our brachiopods. Sadly, at the end of the Paleozoic, 2/3 of the brachiopods went extinct, and they just haven't been the same since. The brachiopods died off, and bivalves took over, and they became the most prolific shelled thing in the ocean. Knoll and Bambach concluded that brachiopods were one of several groups that were the most vulnerable to the Permian-Triassic extinction, as all had calcareous hard parts, so things made of calcium carbonate, and they had low metabolic rate. Today, there are only 3 classes of brachiopods left. Lingulata, which they kind of look like fingernails. They're that shape. Craniata, which look kind of clamish. So as you can see, these were some very interesting animals that lived in the Ordovician period that sadly had their numbers decimated before we got to today. But you can still go to the beaches and find these animals. Please leave them where they are. If you do, photographs are perfectly acceptable, and I highly recommend, if you do go looking for them and you find them, putting them on iNaturalist, because that website is really good at keeping track of all of these things for you. And it's just super helpful for scientists to be able to keep track of populations. I hope you learned a lot about brachiopods today and that your interest in them has grown. And that's saying a lot coming from a dinosaur paleontologist talking about invertebrates. And of course, for those of you who are concerned that maybe the TikTok ban will actually go through on Monday or Sunday or whatever day it is, I do, my primary channel, at least trying to make it my primary channel, is YouTube. So you can find me on YouTube, you can find me on Instagram, you can find me on Tumblr and Facebook. So there are other places. You're not just going to lose me if TikTok decides to, if they decide to ban TikTok. So go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel so that you can still get the updates and still learn about paleontology and geology. And I will fossilize you later.